Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, honorable members. In the last debate on the estimates, Mr. Speaker, I promised that I would focus primarily on my constituency come the debate for the appropriation bill. And this I intend to do today. My constituency of Gros Islet, Mr. Speaker, is, as most of you would be aware, very expansive, very diverse, and of course, very densely populated. This has implications, as you would appreciate, on the complicated and sophisticated nature of the demands that I get from this constituency. The approach that has been taken so far, Mr. Speaker, is a multifaceted one and a clinically targeted one. When it comes to the development of Gros Islet, the Gros Islet constituency, I leave no stone unturned, I spare no effort, and I apply myself wholly, solely, entirely to the needs and the demands of my constituents, because I promised very solemnly in the last campaign at the 2016 election that I would provide them with the kind of representation that they have come to know me for. Mr. Speaker, we have begun an approach that is taking us upward and forward. When I first became parliamentary representative for Gros Islet in 2006-2011, we began on that upward forward trajectory. But unfortunately, this upward movement was impeded during the period 2011-2016. Mr. Speaker, there came another who made some outlandish, outrageous promises. If I recall clearly, the slogan was, "Better days are coming." Now, seriously, many will agree that I performed as a parliamentary representative, but you cannot falter people for aspiring towards what is better. They were promised better, and they fell for the promise. Mr. Speaker, that was merely a slogan, as we came to discover. There was no plan, there was no intention even. It was merely a political slogan to win votes. Mr. Speaker, I am not here to make promises that I cannot keep. I am not here to make outlandish statements or captivating slogans for the sake of winning elections. I am here to provide a plan, to articulate a pathway to the development and progress of my beloved constituency, Gros Islet. Mr. Speaker, as the parliamentary representative of Gros Islet, I repeat, I take my mandate seriously. I am passionately devoted and I wholeheartedly embrace the responsibility for ensuring the progress and development of my constituency. And so as a result, Mr. Speaker, since my return in 2016, what has happened is that we have seen the recommencement of the weaving of a brighter future for Gros Islet. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to touch on a few of the areas, some of the achievements, some of the accomplishments, and to talk about some of what is being done currently and what is yet to come. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind my people that they gave me a 5-year term. 4 years have so far elapsed. I have not fully accomplished the entire mandate for which I was elected, but have every intention to do as much as I can And if I fall short, I want to ensure that I end up in the 90s. At least 90% of my promises would have been accomplished. And so in the social sector, Mr. Speaker, I made a number of promises. And that is because I have a plan for Gros Islet. That is not simply and solely infrastructural brick and mortar. It is an entirely holistic plan that incorporates all aspects of human and social development. Mr. Speaker, I recognize that of course we need some structures, some facilities to facilitate programs, and so the projects that I embark upon tie in and complement the programs that we intend to embark upon. And so when we look at health care in Gros Islet, the Gros Islet Polyclinic, I recognized, and I said in my campaign, that I was not satisfied with the fact that the Gros Islet Polyclinic was open from 8 to 4:30, and that after 4:30 we had no access to health care within our community, and that on weekends the polyclinic remained closed. Mr. Speaker, if I recall clearly, the statement I made was that we don't have the luxury of planning if and when we fall sick. So my goal is to ultimately bring the services of the Gros Islet Polyclinic to a 24-hour service. That has to be done incrementally, recognizing, Mr. Speaker, that I operate within an environment in a country where we have limited resources that everybody else around me here are competing for. And so, Mr. Speaker, the first step has already been made. I am pleased to announce, Mr. Speaker, that currently we have extended the hours of service at the Gros Islet Polyclinic from 8 to midnight. And so, Mr. Speaker, I also want to say that I am pleased to announce that those hours of service include the weekend and holidays. Mr. Speaker, it may seem insignificant to some, but that is a giant step forward when it comes to providing quality health care that the people of the constituency of Gros Islet so richly deserve. Mr. Speaker, the Gros Islet Polyclinic is our primary healthcare institution in the north. And to the extent that we can provide services there, to avoid having the people of my constituency to flock the then Victoria Hospital, now OKEU Hospital, I think it will redound to the benefit of not just Gros Islet residents, but the entire northern belt of St. Lucia. And so, Gros Islet, I started by saying, is expansive, it's diverse, and it's densely populated. And so the polyclinic, in and of itself, on its own, cannot suffice to provide the kind of health care that is required in the Gros Islet constituency. And so we have the Grand Riviere Wellness Center and the Moshi Wellness Center. And both of those centers received some attention during my previous tenure. The Moshi Wellness Center in particular was significantly upgraded during my previous tenure. But we were not satisfied with that. This current term, Mr. Speaker, I have done further work for the enhancement of the Moshi Wellness Center. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that through the assistance of the UK Department of International Development via PAHO, Pan American Health Organization, the Moshi Health Center was made a safer place and a place where services can still be provided even during disasters and emergencies. And so the Moshi Center is now more climate resilient, it is more energy efficient, and it is more cost effective in its operation. Mr. Speaker, that will redound to better services, more effective services, and a more satisfied resident of that part of my constituency. Mr. Speaker, I want to move quickly along to the area of education. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased and I want to express my thanks and gratitude to the member from Miku South, Minister of Education, Miku North, the Minister of Education, for the continuous support that is being provided on an annual basis for minor repairs and maintenance and upgrades of my schools in my constituency. This I am grateful for. However, I want to just make one observation, Mr. Speaker, that when it comes to the Grand Riviere Combined School, there is some work that is required, and I'm hoping that some attention can be given to the Grand Riviere Combined School. Mr. Speaker, as a parliamentary representative, there are a number of programs that emanate out of my constituency office, because, as I said, I take my responsibility seriously in providing for the needs and the concerns of the people that I represent. Mr. Speaker, we started a notebook program, and I just want to elaborate briefly on what this entails and what it is all about. Mr. Speaker, we started initially by providing notebooks to children who were in need. Eventually, we recognized that, by and large, contrary to the popular belief, my constituency is not a constituency of solely affluent people. And I observed as parliamentary representative that many of the people who send their children to attend the public schools of Gros Islet were struggling parents in many cases. And so I decided to assist them to ease the burden of the parents. We eliminated notebooks from the book list, and as parliamentary representative, I provided all of the notebooks for all of the children of all of the elementary schools in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, again, you may shrug at it, but it makes a difference. It eases the burden, and it provides a possibility for the children, all of the children, to have what they need to facilitate their education. Mr. Speaker, in assisting parents, in easing the burden on parents, we have what we call a backpack program. This one, I will not say that we have a backpack for every child in every school. I, however, provide backpacks to every one of the schools. It is handed over to the principals and teachers, and they select deserving students who are in need to provide backpacks for them. So that, Mr. Speaker, I'm not trying to expose you or anybody here, but in your time, Mr. Speaker, you probably went to school with your books in nylon bags. That does not happen in my constituency. That does not happen in my constituency. We want to ensure that every child can proudly pack the books in a decent backpack and go to school and not feel any sense of embarrassment or feel that there is any difference between themselves and their peers when it comes to the provision of what is needed for school. Mr. Speaker, to encourage our students, especially the students in the public schools, and I stress the public schools because, Mr. Speaker, my constituency perhaps has the most private schools in the entire island. But understand, Mr. Speaker, that people who send their children to private schools can afford to provide for their children. And so I focus mainly on the public schools. Mr. Speaker, I've initiated and instituted since when I was parliamentary representative in 2006, what we call the Top Achievers Program. And this Top Achievers Program provides incentives to students to succeed and to do well, and provides reward for those who in fact do well. And so we reward students who do well in Common Entrance. We reward students who do well in CXC, and so that includes not just the elementary school, but also the secondary schools in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, those students receive varying prizes, but one standard feature is the fact that every top achiever receives a laptop. Lately, we have expanded the program to include other categories, that is, some of the extracurricular activities. And we give laptops, we give tablets, we give all kinds of electronic devices that will assist the students in excelling and in doing well in their education. Mr. Speaker, I also want to mention bursaries. Again, I want to thank the Ministry of Education through the Minister member for Micoud North. Mr. Speaker, quite apart from the bursaries provided by the Ministry of Education, there are bursaries provided by the SSDF. Mr. Speaker, I started by saying, among other things, that my constituency is densely populated. Mr. Speaker, the good, well-appreciated effort of the SSDF and the Ministry of Education does not suffice. And so I step in as parliamentary representative from my constituency office. We augment the bursaries to assist parents who can ill afford to provide this much needed, necessary aspect of human development education. Mr. Speaker, we also assist with equipment and supplies to those who are in need. And I'm pleased to say that that includes equipment for the special education programs at 3 of my public schools, namely Gros Islet Primary School, Moshi Combined School, and Grand Riviere Combined School. Mr. Speaker, the Moshi After School program, a flagship program that I'm very proud of. That is a program that began during my previous tenure. Mr. Speaker, these programs have had an opportunity to mushroom and for people to appreciate the value of those programs. And I rather suspect, that contributed greatly to the reason why I'm back here. You see? Because the better that was promised was never delivered. You don't live what you have seen that is good for what you have promised that will never come. Mr. Speaker, and that is why in my campaign during the last election, I reminded my people of the mistake that they made. I didn't scold them for it. Like I said, everyone aspires to betterment. And the St. Lucia Labour Party promised betterment. That was never delivered, that never came. And so when the election campaign began, I said, you had a candidate who was an unknown entity in Gros Islet, whether it be interest in the constituency, or involvement in the constituency, or concern about the constituency. But she made some impressive promises. The mantra was, jobs, 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 better days are coming. But since we saw unemployment, 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 and the worst ever days we had seen, I implored my people, let us not fall for that again. I asked them, and I remember the words that I used, Mr. Speaker, was, "Pa kite shall kieneu." The St. Lucia Labour Party will come to you. I shall do this, I shall do that. But it is only until they have gotten your vote. The shall? The shall is that you will do it. A promise, an empty one. Mr. Speaker, shall Salah, please it pass and shall look keep a We are not falling for that again. From now on, my people are going to base their judgment on performance. And so I asked them in the last campaign, do not listen to any promise by me or anyone else. The incumbent had a term. Previously, I had a term. I asked them to compare, to contrast, and then to choose. Mr. Speaker, here I am. They made a choice. They made a choice, and they made a good choice. And that is why I'm committed Mr. Speaker, to fulfilling the promises that I made to the people of Gros Islet to unroll and unfold the program of development that I presented to them that they embraced wholeheartedly. Mr. Speaker, the Moshi After School program. Right now, that program has produced an orchestra that performs at hotels, in public gatherings, and at special events in Gros Islet. Talking about that, I have to assist them with some instruments very soon. Because they deserve it. They deserve it. Mr. Speaker, the after-school program is a program that takes place in many communities around the island, and it has served a tremendous purpose in terms of assisting not just the students, but the parents who have to work, and to bridge the period between the time that they come from work and the time that the students are out of school, so that those students can be gainfully, productively engaged in activities that are educational, recreational, and developmental. And so I have this listed as one of the programs that we have continued for the development, for the benefit of the education of our children. Mr. Speaker, ICT centers. I saw the need for ICT centers, and I wanted to ensure that there was no disadvantage to people who were vulnerable, who were poor, who were less fortunate. And so while you have your internet and your computer at home, I wanted to ensure that every child had access to those services and facilities. I set up a number of ICT centers in 2006, 2011. So I know you are going to ask me then, why have I returned and set up ICT centers again? Mr. Speaker, they were all shut down. Computers taken away, I don't know what was done with them, where they went to, but it was shut. Now, I thought to myself, you know, I listened to the other side, and they like to use the word callous, you know. That is the meaning of being callous. When you do something like that to deprive poor people of what they can ill afford, I was not asking that the representative at the time do anything, you know, just let it be. That was too much. So, Mr. Speaker, knowing the needs of my people, recognizing the plight of my people, I have returned and I have reopened an ICT center in La Bonne, an ICT center in Deramo, an ICT center in Rivière-Mitan, an ICT center in La Fayette, and an ICT center in Grand Rivière. I must confess that while the ICT center in Moshi was still operational, we have since enhanced the service that is provided there. So we now have 6 ICT centers. Mr. Speaker, foresight is something that doesn't come with mere eyesight, you know. It's not because you have eyesight to think you have foresight. But Mr. Speaker, I cannot pretend that I knew there was a COVID-19 coming. But here we are with COVID-19. You know the role that those centers are playing in the lives of some of our students who are out there now, many of whom who are doing their studies virtually, online, and having the facilities available to them. Mr. Speaker, I am going to further enhance the services provided by those facilities, because the use of the facilities have become more extensive, and the demand on those facilities has become greater. And so, Mr. Speaker, what we will do is extend the range of the Wi-Fi that is provided. In some cases, provide for shelter in the close vicinity of those centers, so that people who have their own devices can come in the neighborhood nearby and utilize the services. Mr. Speaker, you just heard from the Minister of Sports, the member from Denry South, the National Sports Academy. Yes, it's a national project, but Mr. Speaker, I want to remind everyone here that this is Gros Islet. That's right. And before I go further, talking about calluses, I don't want to step on anyone's callus. Mr. Speaker, I want to express my sincere gratitude to the member of Denry North for the tremendous work. Sorry, you should have stood up. You should have stood up on a point of order. You should have stood up on a point of order and say to the speaker that I'm misleading the House. Mr. Speaker, the member for Dennery South, for the tremendous work that he has done in the area of sports. Mr. Speaker, when a member for Dennery North comes in, is just like me. He was a former Minister of Sports. But unlike me, he does not want to admit that this current sports minister has dwarfed us. The work that he has done is legendary in terms of the facilities and the programs that have been created. Mr. Speaker, I speak of the National, I almost said the Gros Islet Sports Academy. The National Sports Academy in Gros Islet. Now, why I'm so pleased about this, Mr. Speaker, naturally, by virtue of proximity, my people will have access to that national sports facility. And so, I am certain, in the not-too-distant future, not only Gros Islet, but the entire St. Lucia will see the fruits of that investment that was made in that facility for the benefit of the development of sports and the advancement of our young people in this country. Mr. Speaker, when I talk of education, and you notice I spoke of the National Sports Academy under the heading of education. That is another subject you don't want to get me started on, Mr. Speaker. You know my position when it comes to sports and what I believe sports can do for an individual and for a nation. But Mr. Speaker, I don't only speak of education at the primary school level, at the secondary school level, and as extracurricular, what have you, like after school programs, ICT centers and so on. I think of education as something that should begin from as early as possible. And so you see, the early childhood development centers, I think they are critical. I think they are of paramount importance in setting the foundation and starting off an individual on the path to a sound education. Mr. Speaker, again, I have to express my sincere gratitude to the member for Mipo North for the repairs that were done on the Gros Islet Early Childhood Development Center after the fire on Independence Day 2 years ago. This center is now ready to be reopened, and I am in dialogue with the Ministry of Education to ensure that come September, whenever COVID-19 permits, that center be reopened to serve the people of Gros Islet. Mr. Speaker, young mothers will tell you the value of those centers. And of course, in time to come, the young children who attend that will tell you what it has done for them. Mr. Speaker, again, I want to remind everyone present here, Mr. Speaker, that my constituency is expansive and it is densely populated. So, one early childhood development center cannot be adequate for Gros Islet. So in addition to this public early childhood center, there are a number of private centers, but we want them to be strategically located to provide access to as many people as possible. And so in Moshi, today, I hate the phrase as we speak, but today, as I speak, there is construction taking place on a facility that is 70% complete to come into fruition by September so that we can have a Moshi Early Childhood Development Center to the tune of $1.1 million, Mr. Speaker. A welcome development for the young mothers especially and the children of the Moshi area. Mr. Speaker, I want to move into another area, creative industry. And I've heard many criticisms about this government paying lip service to the creative industries. Well, let me debunk that once and for all. The Prime Minister, in his address, made mention of what is being done for the creative industries. But In an address, when you have to address people on 100 subjects, 100 topics, I don't expect you can be as detailed and comprehensive as you could possibly be. And so, there were certain things that were left out, Mr. Speaker, but it is my responsibility to highlight them. Mr. Speaker, in Gros Islet, we have within the Gros Islet Human Resource Development Center that was started during my tenure 2006-2011, that was abandoned by the previous government and not completed. So when you hear they talk about projects started and abandoned because it was not you that started it, they're talking about themselves. So that project was abandoned and not completed. Mr. Speaker, it took the return of the people's humble servant, Lenard Montoute, to complete that center that I started. And you see, that is the thing about it. They should not interrupt good things if they are not capable of finishing it. So I have ensured that that building that is so vital to the development and advancement of our constituency and accommodation for the youth, I completed the center. But Mr. Speaker, what is more important? This is the flagship Human Resource Development Center in the entire island. And I say so not because of the imposing nature and beauty of the center. This is not just a mere hall. Mr. Speaker, within that center, we have the Vladimir Lucian Theater. For those of you who do not know, Vladimir Lucian is an accomplished young poet who is a lecturer at the university, but who has won many regional and international awards already. And I rather suspect in quick time, maybe in contention for a Nobel Prize. Mr. Speaker, that theater that was named after Vladimir Lucian has provided limitless opportunities for theater arts in Gros Islet. So when we talk about creative industries, we don't just talk about creative industries, we work toward making it a reality. Making it a reality means providing the facilities, and there in Gros Islet you have a facility for the theater arts. Mr. Speaker, that same Human Resource Development Center is now being retrofitted. A section of it is being retrofitted to house a music lab. Mr. Speaker, when the Honorable Member for Dennery South spoke of what we're doing for the youth, again, he has the responsibility to talk about the entire island, so he just gives you a snippet of what we're doing for the youth. This music lab is to facilitate the youth of the constituency of Gros Islet in terms of developing and producing music. Mr. Speaker, that center is being built to the tune of $351,000, and it will go a long way in enhancing the livelihood and employment opportunities of the young people of the constituency of Gros Islet. And that I am proud of, and that I am pleased with. Mr. Speaker, creative industries, Mr. Speaker, as a parliamentary representative, we have strengthened and developed Gros Islet Carnival. And I provide support not just to the Gros Islet Carnival, but to the bands participating in Gros Islet Carnival. And so, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to addressing and attending to the comprehensive need of my constituency, I'm just touching on all the topics where I provide quality representation to my people. Mr. Speaker, water and sanitation. Mr. Speaker, it is a crying shame that I have to talk about provision of pipe-borne water today in 2020. Mr. Speaker, you will appreciate the need for proper sanitation. And if you did not before now, I think the emergence of COVID-19 has driven home the need for proper sanitation. Everywhere I go and I hear, wash your hands, But if you do not have pipe-borne water, you may still be able to wash your hands, but you may be doing something more detrimental by washing your hand in water that is impure. In the Vieux-Sequi area, there's a pond where many people fetch water. Mr. Speaker, I am telling you, that is a hazardous practice, that is a dangerous practice, and a practice that we must bring to an end. And so, Mr. Speaker, in Vieux-Sequi, we have commenced the Vieux-Sequi water project, where we are going to provide pipe-borne water to the residents of Vieux-Sequi. There are a few of them who already have pipe-borne water, a few of them, but because of the elevation where they are in Vieux-Sequi, they experience low pressure, Mr. Speaker, and some of them have to wake up late at night to fill their buckets and bath pans and so on, resulting in people being fatigued and experiencing all kinds of strains and sprains and so on carrying water. I want this to be a thing of the past, and thank God, by December this year, you will not hear this subject again, because those people will have a more reliable, more efficient supply of water, and those over 100 households who did not have water connection will now enjoy that basic necessity of having access to pipe-borne water at their homes. Mr. Speaker, in my previous tenure, despite all what I did, all the brick and mortar and all the projects, the project I was most proud of was the Labon Water Project. Mr. Speaker, people from as wide and as far as United States of America spoke of that project. Mr. Speaker, however, when we brought water into Labon, we went into central Labon and went towards Dauphin. But the people of lower Labon were never serviced. Mr. Speaker, when I demitted office in 2011, I thought that was a natural, obvious progression that would have taken place, that those people would have been provided with water, because most of the hard work had been done to actually bring the water to the area. Mr. Speaker, it is only now, with the return of your humble servant, that we are undertaking Labon Water Project Phase 2 to ensure that every resident of Labon has access to pipe-borne water. Mr. Speaker, the Vieux-Sequi Water Project is to the tune of over $2 million, and the Labon Water Project will cost some $977,000. Mr. Speaker, the Labon Water Project will provide water to an additional 131 households, Mr. Speaker. Over 300 people if you take an average of 3 per household. Mr. Speaker, we are going to run some 2.06 kilometers of 4-inch diameter pipes, and all the ancillary accessories that has to take place, including fire hydrants, Mr. Speaker. That was not done in the first phase, but now we're going to put in fire hydrant for the safety and protection of the people of the constituency of Labon. Mr. Speaker, these are the kind of projects that I'm proud of. These are the kind of projects that I strive for, because I know the difference that these kind of projects make in the lives of ordinary people in my constituency. And when I say ordinary people, Mr. Speaker, I'm not suggesting anything derogatory by that statement, but the people who are lesser fortunate. So, Mr. Speaker, parks, sporting facilities, recreational facilities, that is synonymous with my representation in Gros Islet. In my previous tenure, I established 3 parks in Gros Islet. Mr. Speaker, time for lamentation. Mr. Speaker, I came back to office. One of the parks, an attempt was made at the last minute to upgrade one of the parks, because they had been neglected for almost 5 years since my absence. Mr. Speaker, the other parks were in a deplorable condition. I immediately moved to reinstating them, refurbishing them. But Mr. Speaker, sadly, I have to say that some members of the Gros Islet constituency decided to engage in the act of vandalism at the York Félicien Park near the Gros Islet playing field, and to a certain extent at the Moshi Park. When I left, There were facilities at the Moshi Park to get Wi-Fi access. It was a hotspot that was stolen, taken away, and a number of things destroyed. Imagine, Mr. Speaker, at the York Felicien Park in Gros Islet, we installed concrete benches and tables, and as soon as they were installed, they were broken again. Mr. Speaker, you can go there now and see the destroyed furniture. Mr. Speaker, I have not repaired them, but I have every intention to repair them. But I want to say one thing to the people who engage in such practices, whatever the motivation, I ask them to desist. Because this time around, Mr. Speaker, along with the reinstatement and refurbishment of those parks, we're going to have security cameras. And if anyone is caught, I will go out of my way, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that that person is prosecuted. Because public facilities should be respected. Mr. Speaker, talking about sporting facilities, again, during my previous tenure, you're probably wondering, boy, if there was anything I did not do during my previous tenure, and why I still have so much work to be done. The constituency is expansive, it is diverse, and it is densely populated. So there is a lot to be done. Mr. Speaker, let me start by giving credit where credit is due. I found a state-of-the-art change in facility, right, member for Castle South, at the Gros Islet playing field. Okay? That was put in place prior to World Cup cricket. I saw the utility of that facility and the difference it made, because while I said it was put in for World Cup cricket was over a short period of time, and it remained there after World Cup cricket for our use as residents of Gros Islet. So our sports people benefited from its use, and I saw the difference that it made. I saw one of the things he did. I saw, but you are a constituent, that's right. And that's why you must always vote in favor of your constituency when I table anything. And you must, in the next election, vote for good representation as well. So Mr. Speaker, we established, recognizing especially for the young sportswomen of our constituency. Mr. Speaker, it was a crying shame to see young sportswomen come into a facility and to change, some of them coming straight from work, from school, to come to a facility, have to change, hide behind cars, hide behind trees, and so on. That's just not acceptable. That's just, not appropriate. And so we established changing rooms in Moshi. We established changing rooms in Grand Riviere and changing room in Corinth. Mr. Speaker, I regret to say again, every one of those changing facilities, including the state-of-the-art changing room in Gros Islet, have been vandalized on more than one occasion. Now, that is a regret for me. I want to say here that I don't want anyone to come away with the impression that that is the nature of the people of Gros Islet. That is only a few. And you know the damage just a handful can do. Again, I want to appeal to them to desist, because we are not going to waste resources in establishing facilities that is going to be destroyed by people who are anti-development and progress and are just, willfully showing that kind of level of indiscipline and disregard for public facilities. Mr. Speaker, talking about recreational facilities, the Gros Islet Comfort Station and Information Center. Now, the member for Soufrière Saint-Jacques will tell you that he comes from the Mecca of tourism and so on. Yes, a lot of lovely sites, and I marvel at what he has done, the transformation that has taken place in his constituency. But we still hold our own when it comes to tourism, Mr. Speaker. We still hold our own. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have to recognize that if we are to invite people, we must make them feel welcome. And when I talk about inviting people, I speak not solely of tourists, but even locals. Everyone here will tell you their favorite entertainment stomping ground is Gros Islet. I mean, I've said before, much to the chagrin of some of the other members, that perhaps the number 2 entertainment spot in the world is Gros Islet. I will not tell you where is number 1. So, Mr. Speaker, we try to make our people welcome and so on. And that is why we have begun the Comfort Station and Information Center. This facility is about 70% complete, and it does not require much funds, but I am going to ensure, come the receipt of my constituency development program funds, that we're going to finish this comfort station for the benefit of our especially visitors. Mr. Speaker, Pigeon Point. Mr. Speaker, after the easing up of the curfew and restrictions during COVID-19, you should have gone to Pigeon Point. That is the park between the National Park and Sandals, to see the number of St. Lucians who congregated there to recreate. Mr. Speaker, again, that's a facility that was established during my previous tenure. But you know what? As time goes on, as we move on, upgrades, enhancement, further advancements must take place. And so it is my intention during the course of this term to further enhance that facility. And we're going to establish some booths there that will be more aesthetically pleasing to the eye and more client-friendly, customer-friendly, and to ensure that we present a better ambience for the people who visit that area. Mr. Speaker, the Gros Islet waterfront, at the same time, we are looking at the development and enhancement of the Gros Islet waterfront. That will entail quite a number of projects, including the refurbishment and enhancement of the Gros Islet jetty to put it in a position to facilitate the docking of yachts and dinghies and those boats that are used, the ferry boats that are used as well, to bring in more people into the constituency of Gros Islet. That's all part of the economic development of the constituency. Mr. Speaker, we are also looking at the pedestrianization of Bay Street in Gros Islet. I have already written to the Ministry of Infrastructure, who then referred it to the Ministry of Transport, and in principle we have gotten approval and work will begin on the pedestrianization of Bay Street, which will make a big difference in terms of the hospitality and ambience that we can provide.
Honourable Member, you have 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, institutional strengthening and economic opportunities are areas that I consider to be of importance in achieving the goal and realizing the kind of development and progress that we desire and we deserve in Gros Islet. Mr. Speaker, I have spoken of it even in my previous term. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, some things are not within my direct control, and I have to work with the powers that be, as they say, and endure the tedious bureaucratic processes that has to be endured to ensure that those things take place. But I am relentless. I will not give up, because I think these are worthwhile, deserving projects and programs and institutions that we should establish. The Gros Islet Development Foundation, I have not given up on it. And it doesn't matter what the member for Soufrière says. When I see a good idea and it's working, we are not above copying. So we're going to take a page from Soufrière, from the member from Soufrière Pont-Saint-Jacques, and we're going to establish a Gros Islet Development Foundation. Mr. Speaker, I have already spoken for years about the Gros Islet Credit Union. Mr. Speaker, I think what is happening now has made it even more critical that we establish this institution for the benefit of our people when it comes to access to finance, especially for the purpose of investment and savings. Mr. Speaker, I spoke of the Gros Islet waterfront development, and I mentioned a couple of the aspects that we are looking at. I also want to speak of the Dauphin Heritage Tourism Project. In Dauphin, an area just past the community of Labon, where no one really lives anymore, but let us not forget that Dauphin was once a major town in St. Lucia. So much so that the member for Babono will tell you, Babono was a quarter of Dauphin. And I will tell you, Gros Islet was a quarter of Dauphin. That was a major town. Now, abandoned, so to speak, all that takes place there is agriculture and so on. However, there are relics of the past in Dauphin that are in evidence. My understanding is that you see evidence of tools and other artifacts from the Amerindians that are not preserved at the moment, that is open and exposed to the elements and exposed to unscrupulous people who may wish to interfere with them. Mr. Speaker, I have already begun conversation with the Archaeological Society. I have begun conversation with the Ministry of Tourism, and we have set up a committee of residents in the area between Moshi and Labon so that we can look at setting up a heritage tourism site in Dauphin. Mr. Speaker, I have already spoken about the Gros Islet Human Resource Development Center. I don't know what more needs to be said, but to invite you to just take a drive past the building and tell me what you think. Mr. Speaker, many constituencies enjoy programs such as Proud and so on. And Gros Islet is never thought of when those programs are being implemented. But I want to say that quite apart from my affluent communities, I do have rural communities and deprived communities. And so I want to work with the Ministry of Planning to have a land rationalization program, especially in the areas of Diramo and Labon. The intention here is to ensure that we provide facilities of access to land, especially for first-time landowners, and priority will be given to the youth. Mr. Speaker, I speak of all of these opportunities in economic advancement, all kinds of infrastructural, education, sanitation, and all of that. Mr. Speaker, I have also engaged in providing a number of training programs for the people of my constituency. We have had training programs in cake decorating, hospitality training, culinary arts, electrical installation, and entrepreneurial training. Mr. Speaker, you know the most frustrating thing about it is those people have that training. If they cannot get a job at some establishment, they are there languishing despite the fact that they have acquired a skill. So, Mr. Speaker, here's what I'm doing. I am going, in collaboration with the Bell Fund, I am going to provide a portion of my community development funds to go into the Bell Fund, where it will be administered, to provide financing for micro-enterprise by young people. Of course, it will be provided with no interest, but it is a loan that has to be repaid so that we can use it as a revolving fund. Mr. Speaker, details and other stories put it into that. Up next. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about some of the projections I have for my constituency. Mr. Speaker, I would love nothing more than to have a human resource development center for the community of Grand Riviere. When I talk about my constituency, I have major communities. You know, we talk about the National Quadrant Plan. I can talk about the quadrants of Gros Islet. Gros Islet itself comprising of Cap Estate, Bonte, Kazamba, Rodney Bay, Gros Islet Town, Monjiro, Moshi, Diramo, Labon, Vieux-Sikwi, Rivière-Mitan, Asukana is Grand Riviere, Kaimanger, Lafay, all of those areas. Then you go to Grand Riviere with Desgazons, Mont-Serpent, Inglewood, Asou-Canal, Piat, and Monnier. You go to Corinth, you have Corinth, Marisil, Bois d'Orange. Mr. Speaker, every one of those quarters is densely populated and very diverse in nature. And so, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to providing for the needs of my constituency, I want to say that a human resource center in Moshi serves the needs of the people of Moshi. The Gros Islet Human Resource Center, okay, will cover Gros Islet and its environs and quite a bit of the constituency because it's a more global project. But the constituency of the community of Grand Riviere is so wide and so densely populated. I think they deserve a human resource center, and I'm making that plea here now that that be done at some point before the end of my tenure. Mr. Speaker, I want to also look at an area that is the main focus, the primary consideration of my tenure for this term. Roads. Mr. Speaker, I have a few things to say on roads. Because when I come here and I speak of roads, I make my requests, and if I talk of some of the accomplishments in terms of what I have received, I see on occasions people look at me grudgingly, as if I'm getting more than my fair share. Mr. Speaker, let me make some disclosures here today. Mr. Speaker, there are more than 536 roads in the constituency of Gros Islet. 536 is what is listed by the Ministry of Infrastructure. But I can tell you as parliamentary representative, in the recent days, there were 2 roads cut in Rivière Mita. I'm sure that is not captured in the 536. So there are more than 536 roads in the constituency of Gros Islet. Mr. Speaker, having said so, these are not roads leading to nowhere. These are not roads that are not widely used. These are roads with many of which are in residential communities. And people have to traverse those roads on a daily basis, either on foot or with their vehicles. Many of those roads are in a deplorable condition. And Mr. Speaker, I gave my word that I, as parliamentary representative, would do all that I can to make a serious dent as far as the improvement of roads in the constituency of Gros Islet is concerned. And so, Mr. Speaker, here goes. Mr. Speaker, thus far, there are a few roads that have been done, and I'll name a few of them, like the Hilltop Road in Casaba, the Casaba Road leading to Anse-la-Voûte, the Toussali Road, the Degazon, one of the roads in Degazon, 2 roads in Assou Canal, the Norbert, a piece of the road in Norbert. In Cap Estate, we have done some road works. White Rock, in Grand Rivière, Bois d'Orange, near the new church that was built, East Winds, and Vieux-Sikwi, which included the widening of the entrance from Caref to Vieux-Sikwi. Mr. Speaker, these are roads that have been completed. There are other roads that were upgraded and so on, but these are main roads that were completed. Mr. Speaker, under construction as we speak currently, taking place right now, the Laritret Road and Bridge are under construction. Mr. Speaker, in the Piat housing development, we are about to commence. In fact, work has begun because the contractor has already mobilized and so on. So you will see in the coming days work on the ground. The Marisil Grand Rivière Union Road has begun, and the Cardinal Road in Monchy has begun. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned those roads that have been done and those roads that have begun, and you might think, well, boy, you've got a lot of roads, but remember, we're talking about 536 roads. And so, Mr. Speaker, when I stood here during the debate on the estimates, and I said that I intend to make a dent by completing more than 40 roads, that was not an idle statement. I was very serious about it. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wish to say that I have the confidence of the Minister responsible for infrastructure, the parliamentary representative for Castries North, the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the member for Miku South, and the staff of the Ministry of Infrastructure to say with confidence that the roads I am about to list are roads that will be done during the course of this year. I did not say this financial year, Mr. Speaker. I said this year, meaning this calendar year. Mr. Speaker, under the OECC Roads project, in addition to Laritret, in addition to the Casaba Road that I spoke of, in addition to the road in the Piat development, I expect to have Flamboyant Crescent, Flamboyant Way, Flamboyant Drive in Cap Estate done. I expect to have the road beginning at the Diramo Junction to the Labon Junction done. Mr. Speaker, I want to list a number of other roads that I expect to be done, among others. Labon to Dauphin Road, Calabash Cove in Marisil, Corinth Estate, and there's a name there near whose name, I'm not going to call that name. Damas Road in Corinth, the Old Military Road in Bonte, Peewee Drive, again in Bonte, the Montessori School Road, don't know if you want to call it Bonte or Rodney Bay, Carbon Estate Road in Bois d'Orange, Gaston Road near Windjammer, the Gros Islet Coral Avenue Road behind Bank of St. Lucia, the road behind Fulgen's Garage, the Massad Road called Wellington Drive, Orchid Road in Rodney Bay, Almond Road in Rodney Bay, Palm Drive in Rodney Bay, Jacaranda Drive in Rodney Bay, Flamboyant Road, this time not Cap Estate, in Rodney Bay. Asu Canal, Norbert Karef. Pond Road, that is a road in Vieux-Sequi, starting from the pond going in. Bellevue Road, the Anthurium Drive in Bonte, Palm Drive, the Moshi Ravin Makok Road, Marisil Beach Road, that's leading to the residence of a gentleman that you might know called Tom Walcott. The Moshi, I mentioned his name because I will name that road after him, because he has been one of the main proponents to ensure that that road is addressed. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And he's desperately after me to get it done because he knows it can only be done when I'm there. Mr. Speaker, the Moshi Road past the health center going towards the Cardinal Road that is being done to complete that road. The Sunset Motors to Marisil Beach Road, that's another access to another part of Marisil. The Faustin development in Kazaba. The Tuya near Laurels, Tuya Road near Laurels. The road to the back of the Daya Mall, starting in Tuya, going towards the back of the Daya Mall. Kaimanger, past Grady's Bar, to the left. Kaimanger again, opposite Grady's Bar, going up the hill. Flamboyant Road again, but this time in Corinth. There are many flamboyant roads in my constituency, Mr. Speaker. Kaimanger Road near the Pentecostal Church. The Bonaire Road in Marisil. And two other roads in Labon, one leading to the water tank, and another one leading to the area where the residence of the Lecots is established. Mr. Speaker, I went through the trouble of mentioning this. Now, I know tomorrow, or later on, my phone will be ringing off the hook, because there are many other people who will be lamenting the fact that their roads were not called. But Rome was not built in a day, as a previous member said. I cannot do all the roads in one term. I did not promise all the roads in the term. I said I would make a significant dent, and that is what I am going to do. You want all your roads to be done? You know what to do. Return me, the roadmaster. Because this is unprecedented, Mr. Speaker. No other parliamentary representative has provided that volume of roads, I dare say, anywhere in St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I expect the full cooperation of my colleagues in ensuring that those roads are established. There are some roads that will happen on the OECC road program. There are some roads that will happen on the Design, Finance, Construct program. And there are other roads that will happen under the Ministries program. Mr. Speaker, for most of those roads that I went as far as mentioning, the designs have been done. The bills of quantities have been done. In some cases, contracts have already been prepared. And Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Minister of Finance, the final say is yours. The fate of my people lie in your hands. Put that signature on paper so that we can have a smoother ride, a safer walk, and a better path in and out of the constituency of Gros Islet. Mr. Speaker, I want to mention a few other programs because there are people who work hard in collaboration with my constituency office to provide those programs. Mr. Speaker, we have an established program where we provide hot meals to 150 people weekly. In addition to that, on a monthly basis, we provided hampers. Mr. Speaker, since COVID, we are providing hampers weekly. Mr. Speaker, that comes at an exorbitant cost, and that is financed out of my constituency office. That is made possible not because I have deep pockets, but because I have a lot of people who understand the drive that I am on, who are willing to support the effort because they see it's worthwhile, and they too are making sacrifices, not only in kind, but with their time to ensure that we are consistent with those programs on a weekly basis. Mr. Speaker, I want to express my sincere gratitude and thanks to them on behalf of the grateful recipients of those meals and those packages. Mr. Speaker, I pledge that that will continue because I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, I don't even see that as politics. I see it as the role that I have to play as an individual, and I don't want to tout myself as being more humanitarian than anyone, but I believe in charity. And even when I was out of office, Mr. Speaker, I was not an elected member, Mr. Speaker, I continued the feeding program. And that I intend to do whether or not I am a member of this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, I want to wrap up now by saying to the people of the constituency of Gros Islet, I have provided in the past quality representation, and I have made a habit of it. I am continuing to provide you with the best quality representation that you have seen to date. Mr. Speaker, there will be those who will come again making empty promises. And of course, the mantra of late is that I have done nothing. Mr. Speaker, you heard me outline what I have done thus far, what I am doing currently, and what I'm about to do. You call that nothing? Well, Mr. Speaker, if they call that nothing, it is because they are mindful of my ability. And Mr. Speaker, if they think that they have seen something, they ain't seen nothing yet. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Beaufort South.